What we're going to do is go over formatting text in Photoshop. So, just to get started, I'm just going to go over just a few things. If you grab the type tool and just click one time, let's see what is actually there. Some lorem ipsum popped up, which is basically fill text, and you can't see it because the text is white and we have a white background. So let's change this to black so we can see it. All right, so we have this text, and all right, there we go. All right, so a few things to remember is that in your window, and you want to go to character and make sure your character panel is available, which is this panel right here. And that's where you're going to make a lot of your edits when you're formatting text. Now, if you just double click, you can double click your text. And if that doesn't work for some reason, you can just click over here in your layers panel and just click on the big T, and you should be able to select the text that way as well. All right, so if you type your name after selecting the text, you can change the font size here. Let's say if your name was like this, you can actually change the leading, which is the space between each line, each baseline. So in this video, I'm assuming that you have some level of understanding what some of these terms are. Like baseline is basically the line that the text sit on. Um, yeah, so all right, so next is your tracking, which is the space between each letter in a word. So if this entire thing is selected, then the space between each letter on the top baseline and the bottom baseline will all change. Right now it's at 20, which is not default. Default is at 0, which you saw all of them came in. But if I increase that number, the space between each letter increases. Now, a nice key command, which is not tracking anymore, it's more now kerning, and I'll show you how to kern, which is basically similar to tracking. The big difference is that instead of it being evenly spaced between each letter, it's just between two letters. So if I select the oh, there we go. If I select the space between those two letters, hold down your Alt key and then press your right or left arrow, you can directly change the space between two letters. And the reason that is important is because when you're dealing with certain letters in the alphabet, um, things, letters like Y, sometimes the space between that letter and other letters, it doesn't look even, even though mathematically it probably is even, but because of the way it looks like it's not even. So you will want to adjust that with kerning. So that's another thing. Some of this other stuff is not as important. Probably won't use it on a daily basis, but you can do things like change everything to all caps. You can, let's say, take numbers like this and make them, you know, name squared, or do this other thing, subscript, superscript. Yeah, those are the terms. All right, we could also do underline, which I don't know anybody who ever uses underline in Photoshop, but anyway, now to the other stuff, the fun stuff, which is pretty cool. All you have to, we're going to open up our layer styles. So to do that, we can just double click on the layer Remember, if you double click here, all you're doing is changing the name of this layer. If you double click here, all you're doing is selecting the text. So you want to double click in this empty space right here, and then layer styles will pop up. And here you'll have the opportunity to do a lot of fancy tricks like gradient overlay. Now, the reason gradient overlay isn't showing up right now is because you have to understand blend modes. Blend modes, um, basically, the blend mode that I have right now is multiply, and it's going to determine how my overlay overlays onto the text. So if I were to choose normal, then you'll see it because there's no blending going on. Now, the reason it did that with the text that I had, because the text that I had was black, and with multiply, everything black is the key factor. It's the more powerful. It's the powerful color. If you have white and you're using multiply, um, what happens to the white is it disappears. And there, as you can see, there's white in my gradient overlay, which is right here. So that white automatically disappears. So multiply, disappear. Now, if my text was white, you'll still be able to see that gray. But since my text is black, that's not the case. All right, let's see what happens when I put overlay. Yeah, same thing. Yep. So when you're using a gradient overlay, the safest thing to do is to use normal, unless you have something particular in mind. All right, so let's get out of that. We also have color overlay and pattern overlay. The only reason you'll probably use cover overlay if maybe you wanted to blend some colors or something, I don't know. But it's not, you can easily just change the color in directly in your character panel that we just went over. Um, so let's go to stroke. You can add strokes to this. Right now you can't see the stroke because the stroke is white, but we can change the color to red. Let's get a better red. There we go. Red, and then we can change it from inside. From outside to inside to the center. But I always prefer outside because to me it just looks better. Um, Drop shadow is a beautiful thing if you do it right, but it also can be a terrible thing if you do it wrong. All right, so let's look at this. So you can change the distance, the spread, the size, or really the softness, the opacity, and the blend mode, which is right here. So this is referring to how it blends onto the background. So keep that in mind. It's not referring because the shadow is behind the text, not in front of it. So just keep that in mind. All right. Oh yeah, the angle. You can excuse me. You can change the angle that way as well. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a little playing around with, but what I like to think of is that whatever this arrow is pointing in, or this line is pointing in, the shadow is basically going in the opposite direction. So if it's pointing right now, it's pointing more to the upper left. So then the shadow is going to be pointing towards lower right. So that's just how I see it sometimes. It just makes it a little bit easier for me. All right, you can also change the shadow color, which can have a cool effect if you know what you're doing, but can also look really weird if you don't have a plan behind it or a purpose behind it. Something else really cool that would only show up it shows up better if we have a dark background, but outer glow. Now, just to see it, I'm going to change it to a dark color to glow, which kind of defeats the purpose. The blend mode is screen. Let's go to normal. And let's take the spread down, size down. There we go. That's our glow. You can add some noise to it, which looks interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The only thing I want to do is go back over some of the stuff that I forgot to mention. We can also change our font in here. I didn't think it's obvious that we can change our font right here, but I didn't go over it, so I just wanted to be sure that I mentioned it at least. So also you can change the paragraph settings. So right now it's set to center. We can align it left, align it right, so forth, and all these other things. But that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, change the color right here, um, which will defeat the purpose of color overlay. Now, if you wanted to hand somebody a file and then, you know, make them feel like they're going crazy and say, hey, I need you to change the color of this text, and then they keep coming in here changing the color and nothing happens and they don't notice that color overlay is off or color overlay is on, then it'd be a nice prank. But other than that, there would probably not be a reason to use color overlay unless you had something particular in mind that was unique to what you're doing. But typically, you can just change the color of your text right here. All right, and I think that's going to be it. That's just formatting text. Oh, I forgot one last thing. That's not it. Let's change this font to something more solid, and then we're going to change it to a bold font. And let's reduce the tracking, not that much. Yeah, there we go. That'll work. All right, so now I'm just going to come back in here and I'm going to go to Bevel. And now I can add more depth, do an outer bevel. Let's see the difference. You can barely see what's going on. Emboss. All right, let's go to the size. There we go. Now you can start to see what's happening. You can do it from up or down. And I think what it's meant to do with the up and down is make it seem like it's beveling into or out of the object. And to make it smooth, chisel hard. With the font that I have, I would go chisel hard. Yeah. And inner bevel, outer bevel. Yeah. So if we were dealing with something like had metal, like a metal background, then we can do this and make it seem like the text is coming out of the metal, which would be pretty cool. All right, so we can change the angle of the lighting. So we can change the direction the light is coming from right here. We can expand on that by changing the way it curves and all that type of stuff. We can change the blend mode of how the light affects our text. So we can change it to any of these. I like to keep it on the default screen. If anything else, I might change it to overlay. Um, it just depends on whether or not I have color to the light or whether I just leave it white. Now the shadow right now is black and it's on multiply, which makes sense because that is the strong color as we talked about before with multiply. So I would just leave that alone. Unless, let's say you want it to be like a dark red or something, or that's the only thing I would play around with. But other than that, I would just leave it black. But anyway, now that's it. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this helps you in your um, formatting text with Photoshop. And have a great rest of your day. Peace.